Welcome to another edition of Who's Better Baseball, a podcast where we answer a simple question on each show. Who's better at baseball? I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein, managing editor at justbaseball.com, and today's show relates to two players that could be the best assets available at this year's deadline, potentially the best bat on the market and the best relief pitcher on the market. Guys that will make any contender significantly better. And we saw this play out a year ago because these guys were acquired by the Padres at the deadline last year. Talking about Juan Soto and Josh Hader. Would the Padres consider trading them this year and trying to reclaim the significant haul of prospects they sent out to get those guys? Well, recent reporting from Bob Nightingale suggests that executives are wondering why Soto isn't on the market, but there doesn't seem to be any intention from the Padres to do so. You look at where they're at in the race. The division seems unlikely, even though they were favorites coming in. The Diamondbacks are 10 games up on the Padres right now. The Dodgers are 2.5 games behind the D-backs, 7.5 games ahead of the Padres. So you figure one of those two teams likely winning the division. The Giants are sitting 4 games back of first and 6 games ahead of the Padres. They're not quite in the mix, and they're 3-7 in their last 10, and they're 6 games under 500. You look at the wild card race, you have the Phillies, the Brewers, the Giants, all even for that third wild card spot right now. The Pirates are a half a game better than the Padres. And then you look a little bit beyond it, and the Cubs right in the same position as San Diego. The Mets half a game behind San Diego. The Cardinals 4.5 behind San Diego. All of those teams conceivably could make a push. Cubs least likely. You would think the Pirates fall out of it. The Cardinals are having a disastrous year, as are the Mets and, of course, the Padres. But those are 3 teams that were supposed to be contenders that theoretically would continue to try to push their way forward. And I don't know if any of them has a run in them. But the Padres have to feel like they have as good of a chance as any team to make that push with the talent that they have on their roster. And maybe they're not frightened of a Giants team who is actually sitting with the worst run differential than the Padres. The Padres can hold their hat on, hey, at plus 33, they have a better run differential than every team ahead of them in the wildcard standings except for the Dodgers. Giants are sitting at plus 29. Cubs plus 23, yet I think all of us kind of believe they're going to fall out of it, and they probably will sell at this year's deadline because they weren't necessarily supposed to win this year. But there's still a lot of teams to jump to get into this mix. And you have 2 trade deadline assets that would fetch an absolute haul, particularly in a year where it doesn't seem like there's a lot of sellers because of the surprises, like a Reds team that's in first place, like the Pirates who have been better than expected, or the Marlins who are sitting here 13 games over 500, and the Diamondbacks who are 14 games over 500. And you look at the American League side, you have the entire American League East basically still feeling like they can make the playoffs this year. And the Central is where a lot of sellers reside, but there's not a lot of good things to sell if you look at the Tigers roster, the Royals roster, the White Sox roster if they choose to sell. So you continue to look at what can be available. And even you go to the West, like are the Mariners going to be sellers in the American League? Who's going to sell? So this could create a market where the players that are dangled could get a haul. And at some point you have to wonder, how all in are the Padres? How much can they continue to spend? How realistic is it that they can continue to build through free agency? Because the Juan Soto trade gutted their farm system, and they traded some prospects for Josh Hader before that. Are they going to buy again? I'm not saying that they will sell, but I'm saying they should. And look, I got all the Mets stuff behind me. I can make an argument the Mets should sell too. That they should eat down Max Scherzer's contract and try to sell. And then when I do my own show, my other show, Locked On Mets, I still find myself, getting talked into the idea of the Mets making a run to get back into the chase and, holding serve and maybe not doing anything at the deadline. But there's a difference between the Mets and the Padres and the assets that can be dealt. Max Scherzer maybe gets you something back. rental pitcher. If you eat down his contract, okay. Juan Soto, with another year of control beyond this, gets you an absolute generational haul. Maybe not the one that you gave up, but if you can get 75 cents on the dollar right now, do you consider it? Let's look at where this franchise is. Look at the 2025 team. You got Xander Bogaerts. You'd hope he could still play shortstop, I guess. If not, I don't know. Is he a second baseman? I probably don't think so. You got Manny Machado under contract too, though. So those two guys are there in the infield. Fernando Tatis Jr. is looking like an incredible outfielder this year. He has been arguably maybe the best defensive outfielder in baseball. Absolute snub that he didn't make the All-Star roster from the outset. We'll see if he gets added as a replacement before the actual game. But you know you have him on the books as well. So you still have 3 superstar level talents that you'll be building around for the next couple of years regardless. Juan Soto is a guy that long term, obviously the bat's always going to be there, but positionally, you're looking at a DH type. And here's the question. We don't know what the Padres plan to do this offseason. Do they think that they're going to get in on the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes, considering how A.J. Preller has operated and the spending that they have already committed to? You can't entirely rule them out. I don't think he's going there, but there's still that chance. If you got to pay Juan Soto in a couple of years, you can't do that one. You could theoretically sign Ohtani, figure it out later, have the most ridiculous studded roster ever assembled, which you kind of thought you were going to have this year. But if you throw Ohtani in the mix, okay. That's not to say that's likely. That's not to say it's going to happen. But when you think about the future of the Padres franchise and trying to build out your asset base and what you're going to be as you try to build a contender around Bogaerts, Machado, Tatis, you have Darvish and Musgrove under contract as well. You have Jake Cronenworth under contract. At some point, you have to wonder where the farm system gets prioritized. Do you just feel like you can draft and sign internationally and develop it quickly so that you eventually have some young talent to supplement your core? And is it more important to be so star-studded and front-loaded on talent and heavy at the top? You can make the case that, yes, Juan Soto this year, it gives you a much better chance to make a run in the second half. I mean, he's hitting 274. He's got a 423 on base, as he always does. He's walking again over a 20% clip. It will be the 4th season in a row that he pulls that off. Got the 15 home runs, driven in 47. So 153 weighted runs created plus. WRC plus measures hitters based on a league average of 100. So a 153 WRC plus means he's 53% better than a league average hitter. That's also his career mark. He is clearly one of the best hitters in baseball, without a doubt. And if you traded him, your chances of making a run in the second half are a little bit slimmer, maybe a lot slimmer. But I also wonder, when you look at the Padres' hopes for the year, how much does it really diminish it, or do so many other things have to go right beyond Soto that this is a team that can make a run without him? And if you can make a run without him to sneak into the playoffs this year, how much do you think you have to have him to make that run? If you were in a vacuum trying to run the Padres properly and trying to make sure you don't just win this year or next year, but you can stay relevant for 5 to 10 years, is the best course of action at this point letting this season play out, letting next season play out, and then trying to sign Juan Soto? Because the fact is, at every turn, this is a guy that has chosen free agency, that had an opportunity to sign a massive contract with the Nationals, didn't do it. Who knows if anything has been floated on the table with the Padres up to this point. So it seems like, because of his age and the fact that he's going to hit free agency at 26 years old, that his representation, Scott Boras, wants to get him there. And then once he hits the open market, yes, you can be the biggest bidder on him. But there's going to be other teams that call too. And in free agency, anything can happen. Now, the Padres have been able to retain their talent. They did so with Musgrove and Darvish on extensions. They did so with Manny Machado, and they signed Machado at one point prior to that. So they've been able to keep guys around, and they were able to swing a deal for Bogarts this offseason. But they also swung and missed on Aaron Judge, swung and missed on Trey Turner, and Bogarts was clearly the third option. And it's pigeonholed you in this way because now you look at these books and it's $340 million to Tatis. And what did Machado get again on this additional contract? I know Bogarts was $280. You look at, what is it, the 11 years, $350 for Machado. There's so much money on the books moving forward. You have to wonder, are they going to have $400 million potentially to give Juan Soto, if that's all it takes? Because of his age and his health, I mean, you look at his career, it's not like he's been a guy that's missed time. He's played 150 games 3 times, and he's certainly on pace to do that again this year. And his rookie season was the one year he didn't play that many games. Played 116, but, I mean, he was healthy. And I guess maybe he missed a little bit of time in 2020. I'm looking at 47 games played over a 60-game season. But, I mean, I'd have to look back. That might have been a COVID IL stint for all I know. Bottom line, because of his durability, because of his age, here's a guy that can probably command a 13-year deal, 14-year deal. Forrest wants to get crazy, a 15-year deal, and try to just put an astronomical number on the board like they did with Bryce Harper, where he leveraged the age for as many years and ultimately got him to the Phillies on what, in retrospect, is a pretty good contract. And maybe the Padres are the team that's crazy enough to give him a 15-year deal. But with all the uncertainty, with an extra year of control, knowing that you could keep Tatis in the outfield, you can go out and sign another outfielder this offseason and still make a push. You do have to wonder at what point does going all in hurt you and your future goals as a franchise when you have this piece that you could dangle that is, bar none, the best potential trade deadline asset. There's not a bat that's in the same neighborhood as Juan Soto, just like there wasn't last year. But last year you still had a Josh Bell who was hitting really well and ends up going to the Padres in that deal. You had Brandon Drury went to the Padres, who was one of those types of bats. And here the Padres were extremely active. This time around, you look at the market, and I don't know where the piece is that the Padres acquire that puts them over the top. I don't know what they have left to trade. But I do know if they decided to say, hey, Juan Soto, it was fun while it lasted. It was a year. We're going to try to get 80 cents on the dollar of what we traded last year. Your farm system could be in a much better place. And as a franchise, you still have enough stars to build around. It's about trying to find a quality team to put around them. And if this year has taught the Padres anything, maybe that's it. That they need to build a more well-rounded roster, and they need youth. And they don't have it. But Soto's and Tatis are the youth, but youth outside of those star players, young guys that can come in and fill the gaps for you, I don't know if they have it or when they could have it. And that brings me to Josh Hader. If you're going to flip Juan Soto, Josh Hader is a free agent after this season. Are the Padres going to be the team that gives him the contract, that gives him whatever it requires, $20+ million a season? Maybe the spending never stops. But he's sitting there with a 1.15 ERA, striking out 13.5 batters per 9. And any contender would want to throw some blue chips for Hader. And if you were to trade Josh Hader and Juan Soto, the two guys you got at last year's deadline, you could get a bevy of prospects in return. You could end up completely rebuilding your top 10 in your farm the same way you sent your top 10 out to get those guys. You went on a run to the NLCS. You still have talent to make a run this year, even without those guys. And you have a lot of talent on the books to reimagine what the next version of this team looks like around the stars that are locked up under decade-long contracts. Bogarts, Machado, Tatis, a couple pitchers on big deals as well. The question is simply, do you believe Juan Soto is part of that core? Is this the group that you're running with for the next 10 years? Do you believe that strongly that they will ultimately get the job done and deliver a World Series? Because if you feel emphatically that is the case, then you should pull the trigger. But I'll tell you, or that you shouldn't pull the trigger, then you should stand pat. But if there's any question about it, it's not a time to hesitate. Because you will get the biggest haul for Juan Soto if you deal him right now. If it was my franchise, I'd say deal him. But I also understand the desire to continue to win and to try to make a run this year. And guess what? If they don't trade him, they squeak into the final wild card, and they find themselves in the World Series and Juan Soto plays a big part in it, I would own that I was completely wrong here. We'll just see what history has in store for the San Diego Padres. Anyway, that's going to be all for this edition of Who's Better Baseball. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe on YouTube, and check out all the great written content we have coming your way at justbaseball.com.